accepted, then the peace proposal is defunct. Okay? Iran definitely is demanding for two nation theory. So there is a very little thin line which is getting blurred amongst the expectations and the demands of each of these countries. But at the end of the day, the might is right. Israel will always assert and continue with its doctrine of mow the grass from time to time, weaken all the tentacles, keep hitting the head of the octopus, and dominate the entire Middle East. Incidentally, if I may share, Kriti, the foreign relations of USA, I'm sorry I'm making this statement as a student of geopolitics, the foreign relations of USA, unfortunately, the truth is it has been hijacked by whom? In Middle East by Netanyahu. In Central Europe, that is between Russia and Ukraine war, it has been hijacked by the deep state of America. Not now, long, long ago. And to not very far back, you look at 1991, and consequent to that, there was a doctrine which has been hidden as a top secret doctrine of USA, unilateralism. What does it mean? That the NATO will continue to expand till it reaches the shores of Vladivostok. If that be the underlying kind of a hidden agenda, one can well understand and guess, it is anybody's guess, that will this mindless conflict in Russia-Ukraine come to an end? Similar questions come up for Middle East. Will Netanyahu bring this mindless conflict to an end? I don't think so. It will carry on this way because based on this depends the survival and the sustainability of America as a superpower, and it will depend on the all 4 5 things that I have listed out, because these are the 5 components as on today which will continue to provide the steady inflow of wealth into America, thereby revive and rejuvenate a sinking economy of the USA. Back to you, Kriti.
All right. Thank you very much, General Sudhakar, for joining me in this discussion. We'll leave it at that for now. Moving ahead now, viewers. Pakistan has entered into an agreement with a firm linked to World Liberty Financial, the primary crypto venture associated with US President Donald Trump's family, to explore the use of World Liberty's stablecoin for cross-border payments. The deal represents one of the first publicly announced tie-ups between World Liberty, a crypto-based finance platform launched in September 2024, and a sovereign state. It also comes amid a warming of ties between Pakistan and the US. According to reports, under the agreement, WLF will collaborate with Pakistan's central bank to integrate its USD1 stablecoin into a regulated digital payments framework, enabled to function alongside Pakistan's existing digital currency infrastructure. All right, now moving ahead to news from India and US. India and the US have reviewed their bilateral engagement across trade, defense and energy sectors in a high-level phone call between External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. During the conversation, the two leaders discussed trade negotiations, critical minerals, nuclear cooperation, defense ties and energy collaboration. The call came a day after the new US ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, assumed charge in New Delhi. Gore has indicated that both sides are discussing the next steps on bilateral engagement and that a possible meeting between senior leaders could take place next month. Earlier, the US envoy also announced that India would be invited to join Pax Silica, which is a US-led strategic initiative focused on securing critical supply chains linked to silicon and advanced manufacturing. I request Mitali Nikore to join me back in the discussion here. She's an economist from New Delhi. All right, thanks, Ms. Nikore, for continuing to stay with us in this discussion. All right. Yeah, how do you see the trade ties between the two nations now proceeding from here, and the questions of tariffs that continue to pose, a challenge, particularly for India?
So I think thanks a lot for having me on this story. So I think it's a very, critical time in geopolitics, and every conversation especially a conversation between a country and the US, and any of the ambassadors from the US or any of the representatives from the US is critical and redefines geopolitics in a way that, we didn't see yesterday. So each day is new, and I think this conversation is probably the start of a thawing of relations between India and the US, which is extremely critical at a time like this. I think the US recognizes that India, being one of the fastest growing economies in the world, is going to be one of the largest buyers of, oil, especially Venezuelan oil, and therefore it is in their best interest to continue working with India to build supply chains and to thaw the trade relationship. But at the same time, yesterday itself, the US imposed 25% tariffs on countries that do business with Iran. So therefore, the relationship still needs a lot of work. But I'm really glad that this conversation has happened between, Minister Jaishankar and Mr. Marco Rubio.
Okay, how do you see the two nations cooperating on energy? You know, because of the recent developments that we've seen in Venezuela, because of past precedents that have been set, India has continued to maintain that it will be importing from Russia as long as it provides cheaper oil and gas, which it does. Now, with Trump having access to Venezuelan oil, of course, he has excess of oil, including from countries like Canada, and US itself has exports in surplus. How do you think that conversation now could be different?
So actually, with the work that the U.S. government has done in Venezuela, with the fact that they are now looking at investing, and U.S. oil companies are looking at investing a huge fixed capital investment and setting up these facilities in Venezuela for actually refining the oil there. This is a long-term game from the U.S. This is a long-term move from the U.S. because in order to actually extract usable oil assets from Venezuela, it can take up to 5 to 7 years of investment from the US side. In such a scenario, it has to be, such that those purchases will happen. There will be revenue coming on the other side. If you're making investments of billions of dollars, you need to know that someone will actually purchase that oil. And India is one of the countries, being one of the largest buyers of oil, in the oil market. It places India in a very, good position to negotiate trade agreements, to negotiate any sort of deals with the US by guaranteeing that it will purchase oil from Venezuela, of course, as long as that meets our price requirements.
Okay, then. Thanks very much, Mr. Korea, for joining me in this discussion and helping us with your opinions. Viewers, we now move on. Now, Thailand's police have reported that emergency services in northeastern Thailand have rushed to the scene after a train derailment caused by a construction crane falling onto 3 carriages, killing at least 25 people and injuring 80 people was reported. The police stated that the accident took place on morning in the Sikhiho district of Nakhao, Ratchasima province, 230 kilometers northeast of Bangkok, on a train bound for Ubon, Ratchathani province. The transport minister has said that there were about 195 passengers on board and that he had ordered a thorough investigation to be carried out. He added that the crane was working on a high-speed rail project when it collapsed and hit the passing train, causing it to derail and briefly catch fire. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reforms, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has dismissed remarks from Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen after he reiterated Greenland's commitment to Denmark. Asked about the comments from Prime Minister Nielsen, Trump says, "I don't know who he is, but that will be a big problem for him." Bill and Hillary Clinton say they will not be testifying in the House Oversight Committee's Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee threatens to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify. The planet logged its third hottest year on record in 2025, extending a run of unprecedented heat, according to US researchers and European Union climate monitors. US President Donald Trump has now stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into the Venezuelan oil market. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protests in Iran has crossed 2,000. US President Donald Trump tells Iranians to keep protesting, says help is on the way as US mercs strikes. Iran says US seeking pretext for military intervention. Iran officials say 2,000 killed in unrest. Trump says day of reckoning and retribution coming to Minnesota, where 37-year-old Nicole Rennie Good was killed by an ICE agent as protests continue in Minneapolis. Apple signs multi-year deal with Google to fix Siri with Gemini, which the company promised at WWDC 2024 but has since been delayed. Apple had promised 3 big upgrades to Siri to take it on par with rivals like Gemini and ChatGPT. Alright, viewers, our top focus now remains on the protests in Iran, where according to the US-based human rights activists in Iran group, more than 2,000 people have been killed in protests in the country. According to the group, those killed include 1,850 protesters, 135 government-affiliated individuals, 9 people under the age of 18 and 9 non-protester civilians. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has made remarks about Iran, stating that the death toll from the protests looks significant. He has also stated that killing protesters would bring a lot of problems for Iranians leaders and that there will be very strong action against the country if Iran hangs protesters. In response, the Iranian government has accused the US of seeking to manufacture a pretext for military intervention. Let's first hear Trump's statement.
Well, let's define it in Venezuela. Let's define it with al-Baghdadi. He was wiped out. Let's define it with Soleimani. And let's define it in Iran, where he wiped out their Iran nuclear threat in a period of about 15 minutes once the B-2s got there. And that was a complete obliteration, as it turns out, which is what I said initially. Then some questioned it, and they said, Trump was right. So we've been right about everything. We don't want to see what's happening in Iran happen. And, if they want to have protests, that's one thing. When they start killing thousands of people, and now you're telling me about hanging, we'll see how that works out for them. It's not. Iran is on my mind when I see the kind of death that is happening over there, we think. So we're going to get some accurate numbers. I'll have it in about 20 minutes. We'll get some accurate numbers as to what's happening with regard to the killing. The killing looks like it's significant, but we don't know yet for certain. I'll know within 20 minutes. So.
Joining me now in this discussion is Adrian Calamel, who is a terrorism scholar from New York. Thank you, Adrian, for joining me here. Adrian, what's really for Trump in Iran should he plan military intervention? What would be his final objective?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Kriti. Good to see you again. I think his final objective would be for the regime to change. We looked, excuse me, we have to look at the proximate concerns, which are, you hear numbers from it was about 2,000, 3,000 a couple nights ago. Really, estimates are up to about 10,000. I think that's a conservative number that we're talking about here. So the immediate concern is getting and providing some space for the protesters. Trump did make a statement that he wants the Iranian people to take back their institutions, and there was another comment mixed in there. And what that really is it's a message to the Iranians. And the message to the Iranians has been clear for a very long time, is we want to take back our nation on our own. We want to do it on our own, but we need just a little bit of help. And I think Trump he has provided that help along certain means. He mentioned the killing of Soleimani, who was responsible for the 2019 crackdown where they shut off the internet and they killed 1,500 people in the course of roughly 8 hours. So there's things Trump can do as far as communication, Starlink, getting more terminals in the country. But I think one thing that needs to happen is he needs to look at specifically targeting besiege bases, IRGC bases, and even possibly a decapitation strike against Khamenei.
All right, Adrian, you would agree that U.S. sanctions on Iran have sparked the protests in Iran in the first place. What does U.S. now would really do? How long before we can expect a military action in Iran by the U.S.?
Well, I want to back up to that first statement, because the U.S. sanctions did not cause the protests. The protests are a culmination of a whole number of issues, and the U.S. sanctions are just one part of it. You talk about a complete, it's not a meritocracy, it's complete nepotism. The IRGC controls 80% of the economy. It leaves no space for the people. They've seen their country get
But
into
they did
wars.
lead to damaging the Iranian economy, hence the protests.
No, I think we're conflating some issues here. The Bazaris who rose up are basically the lifeline for the Islamic Republic's economy to operate in the outside world, the IRGC economy. The Bazaris do hold significant political and economic strength, and that's why this is being coined as an economic uprising. But it's not about that. It's even about environmental reasons, where the people in Iran, they have a water crisis right now where people cannot get drinking water, and that's not because of sanctions. The Islamic Republic did this to themselves over 47 years. The Soviet Union, we saw the same thing, where the Politburo, they were the only ones that benefited from the system. And the old joke was, yeah, communism, we're all equal. We're equal in poverty. Well, the same applies with the Islamic Republic and the people there. I talked to the people there. I know.
All right, sure. What's
as
next?
far as U.S. strikes, when do I expect something? I expect something relatively soon. I mean, the slaughter cannot, Trump cannot make the same mistake that Obama made during the Syrian civil war when he drew a red line there on chemical weapons and then backed away from it. When politicians draw red lines, it puts them in a box or they act on it. In Trump's case, he acts on these red lines. Now, he did say previously, if people die, then he's going to get involved. Well, I think he kind of put some window dressing on that with the 25% tariffs on nations that are doing business with the Islamic Republic. But he did mention the hanging. If there's a hanging, then that will change. Well, the Islamic Republic does have a hanging scheduled for tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we look to tomorrow for that time frame. It's hard to say, but that's part of Trump. And when the Islamic Republic is an enemy of the United States, and when you're dealing with a country like that, you want to keep them off balance in these type of situations, especially in this type of situation.
All right, Adrian, do stay on with me as we proceed to cover now some news from Venezuela. Because Donald Trump has stated that the U.S. is ramping up oil flows from Venezuela. He's presented the move as part of his broader energy strategy to lower costs at home and strengthen U.S. supply. Moreover, he has framed the push for Venezuelan oil as beneficial for both countries, arguing that increased Venezuelan oil output would support American consumers while also reshape the country's energy ties in the region.
We're bringing Venezuela back, and we're going to be great for Venezuela, great for our country. We're taking in, as I said, millions and millions of barrels of oil, and now they're coming in initially on a daily basis, 50 million, and values of over $5 billion. That's in one day. Winning is a good thing. We're going to work with Venezuela. We'll make that country very strong again. We'll get oil prices down even further. We have it down at about a 6-year low, 7-year low, but we're going to get it down.
These remarks by Trump come amid fresh uncertainty over private sector involvement in Venezuela's oil industry. Trump has recently signaled that he could block ExxonMobil from investing there after the company's chief executive raised doubts about Venezuela's investment climate, pointing out the need for legal and regulatory changes. The comments by ExxonMobil's chief followed a White House meeting with leading oil executives where the Trump administration urged companies to commit large-scale investment to revive Venezuela's oil sector after the removal of Nicolas Maduro. I request Adrian to join me back in the discussion here. Adrian, how do you think do those reality checks for him?
No, he's in a difficult position with this because kicking out ExxonMobil. First of all, bringing in the oil companies, I get that, but he also has to understand the way the oil companies look at this. They're looking at this. This is an industry, the Venezuelan industry, that's been really run into the ground. So they're going to pour tons of investment into it. And then what happens when Trump leaves office in 4 years' time and someone else is voted into office? Is that investment safe? The millions, billions of dollars that U.S. companies, is that oil industry going to be nationalized again? Because as far as I can tell, the current government remains in place. The security apparatus remains in place. It was a decapitation strike by taking out Maduro, but everything else seems to be. And quite frankly, the current leader, she can play a stalling tactic on this if she wants to, and kind of shorten the runway and make it so that the next elections or even midterm elections, Congress can have some influence over things, make things difficult on Trump on his ambitions there. I'm not in the oil industry, but you have to imagine geological surveys need to be done. They need to do their due diligence there, and this is not a snap of the fingers and turnkey solution here that things can happen overnight.
Sure. How long, in your opinion, before Venezuela is really ready for investment by these large oil giants in America?
Well, that's difficult. I hate making predictions, and that's difficult to say.
But realistically speaking, the Venezuelan oil is thick. It needs different infrastructure. And the companies, as of now, given the political climate, are not signaling readiness to invest immediately. That's definitely going to take some time. And in fact, the same applies even for Greenland, should Trump acquire the island.
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from Greenland, but I agree with you on this. This is not a short-term, some of the short-term things that we've seen as far as confiscating sanctioned oil that was part of an illicit ghost fleet, that's one thing. But then as far as getting oil out of the ground, I will say that the Venezuelans were able to repair some of their oil industry thanks to the help of the Islamic Republic. So it's not like it's completely broken down the way it was roughly around 2019, 2020. But they can still get oil out of the ground. Now Trump needs to convince that, again, the same government is still in place. The same government, which is a socialist, bordering out almost a communist government, that at first chance that they get, they will nationalize that industry if there's not American armada standing right outside of it. America's been down this route multiple times in Latin America, dating back to the 1900s. We do this, we send in troops some cases. In this case, hopefully we won't. But you look back to the American Fruit Company, long history in Latin America, all through Latin America. They were monopolies that controlled Latin America. So Trump needs to be careful that he doesn't fall into the same trap that America has repeatedly in the Southern Hemisphere.
And thanks very much for joining me in this discussion. With that, viewers, we're now going to proceed. Let's also, in fact, tell you that Venezuela's acting president Delcy Rodriguez is planning to send an envoy to Washington this week as the Trump administration is reopening its embassy in Caracas. Experts say that Trump's move is part of a broader push to restore diplomatic ties after years of suspension. The visit by Venezuelan envoy Felix Plasencia is expected to involve meetings with senior U.S. officials. Last week, the U.S. sent a small diplomatic team to Caracas to assess conditions for a possible phased reopening of its embassy, which has been closed since 2019. All right, viewers, with that, we're getting some breaking news from Thailand, a tragic news. Now, according to local authorities, a construction crane collapsed there earlier today, striking a passenger train and causing it to derail. The train accident has reportedly killed at least 22 people and injured more than 30. Officials say that the crane fell onto Special Express number 21, which was traveling from Bangkok to Ubon Ratchathani near Banthano Kod in the Sekhoi district. Several carriages were damaged, leaving passengers trapped inside. Rescue operations continued for hours to free the survivors and provide medical assistance. Authorities have now opened an investigation to determine the cause of the crane collapse, addressing concerns over construction safety at the site. All right, with that, we're now going to move. The Inter-American Development Bank has announced a $4.5 billion financing package for Bolivia during IDB President Ilan Goldfagen's visit to La Paz in Bolivia. The announcement has marked the institution's return to the country after 15 years of absence and signaled that renewed international confidence in the country's economic direction. Meanwhile, the IDB president and Bolivian president have responded. Let's hear their statements.
El BID está aquí para mostrar la confianza en este momento de decisión. Nuestra presencia es un señal claro de esta confianza. Y lo vamos a mostrar esa confianza con lo que llamamos escala, números. Estamos construyendo un paquete de hasta 4.500 millones para el periodo 2026-2028. Es casi 6 veces más que el periodo anterior.
El diálogo con más de 160 organizaciones en los últimos 10 días. Se logró un factor de unidad y, reitero, la cultura de la confianza entre bolivianos para que hoy día se confirme que el mundo apuesta con más de 4.500 millones de dólares y los bolivianos estamos unidos y confiamos en nuestro futuro. Esto es central porque todo aquello que vayamos a hacer para el occidente del país, para el oriente del país, para el norte amazónico, para mi región, el sur de la patria, tiene que construirse bajo la unidad, pero sobre todo bajo la cultura de la confianza.
All right, joining me now is Dr. Ajay Dua, who is former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua, for joining me. What's your assessment of the Bolivian economy and how do you see IDB returning?
Thank you for having me in this discussion. The Inter-American Development Banks agreeing to extend a help of $4.5 billion over the next 3 years to Bolivia should be a respite, a big respite for the government of Bolivia, which for over 15 years had become a totally leftist government, and thereafter the lot of the people in Bolivia had impoverished to an extent that no one was willing to lend any more money, be it the Inter-Development Bank of the Inter-Development American Bank or Inter-American Development Bank, IMF, or the World Bank, or any bilateral agency. So with the going away of the last party, I would in fact say vanquishing of the MAS, which had ruled that country for 15 years, and it could not get even one seat in the elections held late last year, when President Paz has been returned. In the House of Deputies, not a single member. In the Senate, not a single member. That means the people were fed up and they voted a new government, which is showing market orientation conduct. I would think that from one extreme to the other, yes, it was probably desirable, but the actions would need to be taken very carefully when you change the system of government. Bolivia has been heavily indebted. Its people have become poor, and its agriculture, the main vocation of the country, growing cotton and
other food grains, has taken a hit. It doesn't have much of exports. It doesn't have a per capita income very much to talk about. So a lot has to be done there. A careful handling by the new government, which might be rightist, but the fact that agencies and governments are willing to lend to it is itself a sign of confidence in its future.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Dua. Unfortunately, that's all the time that I have in this discussion. We'll let you go and move on now, viewers. Now, European Union scientists have said that the planet experienced its third warmest year on record, and average temperatures exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming over 3 years in 2025. The data from the European Union's European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts confirmed that the last 3 years were the planet's 3 hottest years since records began, with 2025 just marginally cooler than 2023 by 0.01 degrees Celsius. The warmest year on record was 2024. The world has also just experienced the first 3-year period in which the average global temperature was 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial era, the limit beyond which scientists expect global warming will unleash severe impacts, some of them irreversible. Let's in fact listen in to what European Union scientists are saying on this development.
So the Global Climate Highlight present effectively the first snapshot of what the climate of 2025 has been. And the data we have now at the beginning of January indicate that 2025 has been one of the 3 warmest years on record, in particular the third warmest, by a very small fraction of a degree. We are talking about 0.01 degrees cooler than 2023, which is the second, and a tenth and a half of a degree cooler than 2024, that, as we know, has been the warmest.
All right, viewers, let's end the bulletin with some tech news now. Dutch chip maker Nexperia is back in court today as its European managers face off against its Chinese owner Wingtech in an Amsterdam hearing that could shape the country's future. The dispute escalated after the Dutch government temporarily took control, citing concerns about technology and operations shifting to China. A court later suspended Wingtech founder Zhang Shuizheng as CEO and stripped the company of share control. Raising doubts about its governance, judges will now decide whether to order a full investigation or reverse those measures. Wingtech argues that Nexperia must focus on China, the world's largest car market, to survive. Meanwhile, the fight has disrupted supplies, leaving automakers scrambling for chips. A decision is expected at a later date. That's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has dismissed remarks from Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederiksen Nielsen after he reiterated Greenland's commitment to Denmark. Asked about the comments from Prime Minister Nielsen, Trump said, "I don't know who he is, but that will be a big problem for him." Bill and Hillary Clinton say they will not be testifying in the House Oversight Committee's Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee threatens to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify. Planet logs its third hottest year on 2025, extending a run of unprecedented heat according to US researchers and European Union climate monitors. US President Donald Trump has now stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into the Venezuelan oil market. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protests in Iran has crossed 2,500. US President Donald Trump tells Iranians to keep protesting, says help is on the way as US mounts strikes. Iran says US seeking pretext for military intervention. Officials say over 2,500 killed in unrest. Trump says day of reckoning and retribution coming to Minnesota, where 37-year-old Rennie Nicole Good was killed by an ICE agent as protests continue in Minneapolis. Apple signs multi-year deal with Google to fix Siri with Gemini, which the company promised at WWDC 2024, but has since been delayed. Apple had promised 3 big upgrades to Siri to take it on par with rivals like Gemini and ChatGPT. right, we now start with news from the United States, where President Donald Trump has said that the Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell will be gone soon. Trump also stated that Powell was either incompetent or crooked. Trump has also said that JP Morgan Chase chief executive Jamie Dimon was wrong to criticize his attacks on the Federal Reserve, dismissing concerns about undermining the central bank's independence. Trump has clashed repeatedly with Powell over the president's demand the Fed cuts rates. The administration's decision to open a criminal investigation into Powell has drawn condemnation from former Fed chiefs and a chorus of criticism from key members of Trump's Republican Party. Let's in fact listen into what Trump said.
We're talking about the head of the Fed, and I want somebody that when the market is doing great, interest rates can go down because our country becomes stronger. See, you view it differently. Our country becomes stronger, and therefore interest rates should go down, not up. They kill every rally. And just last week, the average 30-year mortgage dropped below 6% for the first time in many years. It's coming down very rapidly, and that's not with the help of the Fed. If I had the help of the Fed, it would be easier, but that jerk will be gone soon. Yeah, I think it's fine what I'm doing. We have a bad Fed person. He was extended by Biden. And yeah, I think he's wrong. I think it's wrong. He's done a bad job. We should have lower rates. Jamie Dimon probably wants higher rates. Maybe he makes more money.
Joining me in this discussion is Sharath Kohli, who's a senior economist from New Delhi. Thanks very much, Mr. Kohli, for joining me in this discussion. What do you think it's really about? The overhaul of the Washington headquarters of the Fed building, or is it really about the pressure to lower interest rates that Trump wants?
Hello, Kriti. Hello to the viewers of NewsX World. I think this is about undermining the independence and importance of Fed. In any standard federal structure, the federal bank has an independent role. A government in power should not be interfering in the monetary policy decisions of the country. But what we are witnessing here is that there is a categorical interference. It is all about why didn't Jerome Powell lower the rates? And the reason why he didn't lower the rates at that time was because the inflation was very high. So when the inflation is high, you can't lower the rates at that time. So the rates have gone down, but they have gone down as per the requirements of the economy. But President Trump wanted them to go down sooner because he wanted the economy to be painted in a better picture. I think so. He's not happy with Jerome Powell, and he's called him stupid earlier also, I remember on an earlier occasion. And now he wants him to go. Well, I think Jerome Powell's decision, in my view, I'm an economist as well. I think his decisions were quite in line with the way the economy was functioning at that point of time, even as of today. But he wants him to get investigated and see as to what is wrong with him. He says he's probably spent something on renovation of the Fed as well. Well, that's up to them to investigate. But there was nothing wrong, I feel, with Jerome Powell's decision. They were done as per the requirements of the economy, Kriti.
And what about the allegations of the $2 billion overhaul of the Fed headquarters?
Well, that is a subject matter of investigation, but I feel President Trump has got some vendetta to settle with Jerome Powell. And Jerome Powell is a very senior, Fed governor. And I really don't think, man with such an experience at that age would have done it. But it's all a matter of investigation. But it's more coming out of vendetta than this thing. It is, although the investigation would prove that, but then I think because he didn't act the way President Trump wanted him to be. But it is not a standard practice, with him, more importantly, for a president to interfere, or head of the state to interfere with the functioning of a monetary policy institution, because it leads to distorted decisions, and monetary policy institutions are separate from the federal structure. That needs to be understood here, Kriti.
All right, sure. How do you weigh on the accusations that Powell has made on Trump? He's saying that it's not really about anything else, but really the interest rates that were not lowered as per Trump's requirements.
No, because see, there is certain degree of personal, vendetta there. They have scores to settle against each other because President Trump, ever since he came to power, was putting pressure on reducing of the interest rates. And Jerome Powell and the Fed governor and the Fed, the FOMC, which takes the decision, the committee, I think they took as per the situation of the economy. So I think it's not about allegations and counter allegations. It is what the economy demanded at that point of time. Well, this is up to Jerome Powell to prove what he's saying is correct, and it is up to President Trump to prove what is correct or not. But principally speaking, decisions are taken on the basis of inflation. The rate of inflation decides how much interest rate should be cut. And I think in US, the inflation is, even as we talk now, the inflation is quite high.
Mr. Kohli, now Trump's threat to fire a Fed chair is unprecedented, of course. Do you think it can backfire?
Yes, it can backfire because each state also has a Fed representative, and he can face opposition from the Republicans as well. He will obviously have opposition from the Democrats, but some of the Republicans may go against this decision because Jerome Powell is a very senior and a very respected banker. So I really don't think this is going to work very well, putting pressure on a monetary policy institution in this manner. Yes, it can backfire, to answer your question precisely, Kriti.
All right, thanks very much then, Mr. Kohli, for joining me in this discussion, but I request you to stay on with me. Moving ahead, viewers, China says that its trade volumes hit a record high in 2025, even as exports to the US fell after higher tariffs were imposed by US President Donald Trump. But Chinese officials say that global demand for their goods have remained resilient. According to them, total trade last year crossed 45 trillion yuan for the first time, marking a new historical high. Vice Customs Minister Wang Jun has shared the figures at a press briefing in Beijing. According to Wang, China sees its economic relationship with the US as fundamentally based on mutual benefit. He has said that stable and predictable ties serve both countries and the global economy. Let's listen in.
指出的是，一些国家将经贸问题政治化，以各种理由限制高技术产品对华出口，否则我们会进口更多。未来，中国开放的大门将越开越大，进口增长的空间广阔，中国大市场始终是世界的大机遇。
统计，2025年，我国对美国进出口4.01万亿元，占我国进出口总值的8.8%。
All right, I request Sharath Kohli to join us back in the discussion here. Sharath Kohli, a clear statement now coming out from China that relations as far as trade is concerned with the US are mutually benefiting both countries. What does that speak about US economy and the superpower status that it held up until now? Because China seems to be much ahead.
Well, I think in the month of October, there was a summit between President Xi Jinping and President Trump, where I think mutual interests were discussed when China had blocked the exports of rare earth minerals, because of which the electric vehicles and AI data equipment manufacturing in America was impacted. So there was a quick fix solution worked out for 1 year that China would continue to export rare earth minerals. And in return, America would continue to give chips to China. Yes, it is mutually beneficial because there are certain products which only, for example, NVIDIA in America, China does need them, and a lot of rare earth minerals, there were 17 of them. And now recently, silver as well, that is the 18th rare earth mineral. America needs a lot of them. So yes, it is mutually beneficial. I don't think having a partisan approach, having an approach where you only think of your own country, you don't think of mutual benefits, is going to work. And whichever country tries to do that, I'm sure they're going to suffer internally, because the world is one family. There is one country who specializes in one product. There's another country specializing in the second product. So they do complement and supplement each other. Yes, I agree with the Chinese statement that it is going to be a mutually beneficial relationship. A one-sided or thinking of your own country only is not going to work here. That's the indication from the statement, Kriti.
is the messaging clear here that you can go on imposing the tariffs as you wish, but that's not really going to affect us? We are doing good business with other nations and our products are in demand.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that is the hidden message here, that because they have recently been threatened with 500% tariffs on dealing with Iran. With dealing with Russian oil. Another 25% tariffs on dealing with Iran.
Yeah.
So I don't think that is going to work out, because America is going to suffer as well. There's a lot of Chinese goods which America needs, and that is what made it mandatory for President Trump to meet in the month of October when he met President Xi Jinping. It was because they were strangulated on terms of rare earth mineral supplies. So I think it is absolutely mandatory for America to make sure that the normal supplies continue. If they keep slapping tariffs after tariffs, I think it's going to be self-destructive, Priti, is what I feel.
What's now then really left for Trump? How can he threaten or deter China as he wishes to?
No, I really don't think he should be making an attempt to deter either China or any country for that matter, because that is not going to work out. It may work out. It may seem like you are the biggest economy in the world, so you can probably do what you want to do. But eventually it's not going to work out, because you're going to feel the pressure within your own country. As I said, in October, when President Trump met President Xi Jinping, there was a severe shortage of rare earth minerals in America. And a lot of manufacturing was getting hindered because of that. So I really don't think that is going to work out. President Trump will have to understand sooner than later that these pressure tactics, these bullying tactics on the countries, threatening the countries with tariffs is not going to work out. And American economy is going to suffer as much, if not more, Priti.
All right, sure. Thanks very much then, Sharat Kohli, for joining me in this discussion. It was good to speak with you. Moving ahead, viewers, let's cover some news now from Uganda, where authorities have cut internet access and limited mobile services across the country just 2 days before the elections, in which President Yoweri Museveni will stand for a 7th contentious term after 4 decades in power. The Uganda Communications Commission had ordered mobile services providers to shut down public internet connections from 1500 GMT in order to curb misinformation, disinformation, electoral fraud and related risks. Meanwhile, the executive director of the Uganda Communications Commission, George William Neobi Thembu, has responded. Let's hear it.
On the recommendation, strong recommendation by the Interagency Security Committee, the Uganda Communications Commission has directed all licensed mobile network operators and internet service providers to implement a temporary suspension of the following services. A, public internet access. B, sale of and registration of new SIM cards. C, outbound data roaming services to one network area country.
All right, I now welcome Eric Jaishankar, who is a journalist from Kigali, joining us in this discussion. Thank you very much, Eric, for joining us. What's your assessment of the ground realities of this election when communication networks have been cut off? Okay, request you to unmute yourself, please. All right, we're trying to fix that audio connection of Eric's there, but news now from Uganda, where we are learning that internet has been shut down ahead of elections as President Yoweri Museveni is seeking a 7th term after 4 decades in power. Uganda Communications Commission had ordered all mobile service providers to shut down public internet connections. All right, Eric is back with us in the conversation. Eric, please continue.
Thank you, Meta. I was saying that this was really expected for the Ugandan government to shut down the internet because they had before announced that they were not going to shut down the internet, but if you follow the patterns, considering what happened to the 2021 election, where the government shut down internet for 4 days, saying that they were trying to cap down disinformation and misinformation. But majority of the critics say that it's a trick of the government to try to reduce what they call the incite of violence, or incite of people to stand up to what they believe is their rights, to protect the votes that they'll be voting on Thursday. So this came as really expected, and majority of them were trying to find actually ways of how to bypass this internet shutdown.
But internet shutdown is only one thing, right? Groups have also been asked to suspend their works, and there have also been reports of some arrests being made across the country.
Yes, this election has been really contested. It's actually, there are almost about 8 candidates running for the president, but the two main race horses are the incumbent, who is the current president of Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni, and his the opposition, Bobby Wine, who was a musician back in the days. So they have been arrested because Bobby Wine says that his camp has been targeted by the government, where his supporters were arrested, and some were, there were even the use of violence, including tear gas. So for them, they see this shutdown of the internet as one of the other ways of manipulating what they will call fraud in the election. So they're quite vigilant, and they've been calling on the citizens to remain at the polls so that nothing wrong happens, according to what everyone is saying.
Eric, what's the public sentiment for the president? Because he's seeking to extend rule after having changed constitution at least twice.
So there's a bit of a clash, generational clash in Uganda at the moment. You have the incumbent president who's been in power for almost 40 years, since 1986. So majority of, and Uganda is has a majority of the young population who are below 35 years of age. So majority of them have never seen any other president other than the current president, Yoweri Museveni. So they've been this clash of generations. So the public sentiment, especially for the young people, have been that enough is enough. You've done already, 40 years is enough to run the country. What you have not done, let someone else do. So there's that clash. But from Museveni's camp, they're saying that they want to protect the gains. They want to protect what they have achieved in these 40 years. But on the other camp, the young generation say that we don't see anything. They say there's been a lot of underemployment, a lot of economic issues. So the sentiment is quite mixed, but majority of the urban youth say that the government has failed them.
Okay, Eric, thanks very much then for joining me in this discussion with your assessment of the situation. And moving ahead, viewers, French farmers have spent the night in Paris after driving hundreds of tractors into the capital to demand action from the government. The protests continued even after Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu promised an emergency agricultural bill aimed at addressing farmers' concerns, including water access, production costs, and predation. Farmers said the measures did not go far enough, as many reported years of losses and growing pressure from environmental rules and disease outbreaks in cattle. Anger is also focused on the pending European Union Mercosur trade deal, which farmers fear will flood Europe with cheap South American beef. Despite a recent €300 million aid package, unions said urgent action was still needed. Police counted hundreds of protesters near Parliament, and farmers said they would keep up pressure until their demands were met.
Qu'est-ce que vous attendez là? On espère des résultats, on espère des avancées concrètes sur ce qu'on demande. Et le fait qu'on reste ce soir dormir à Paris, c'est le résultat de non-résultats qu'on attendait aujourd'hui.
Je viens de le dire, l'élément clé, c'est de permettre aux agriculteurs de comprendre quel est ce qu'on attend d'eux en fait, quel est le cap que fixe le gouvernement pour l'agriculture. Donc il y a bien évidemment des sujets de contrainte, mais ça on a avancé sur un certain nombre de sujets. Ces sujets, encore une fois, ne sont pas complètement compris de la part des agriculteurs, puisque c'est des sujets parfois très techniques, et donc on remonte au créneau par rapport à un sujet de trésorerie.
Conservative US Supreme Court justices appear to uphold state laws banning transgender athletes from female sports teams amid escalating efforts nationwide to restrict the right of transgender people. The justices heard more than 3 hours of arguments in appeals by Idaho and West Virginia of decisions by lower courts siding with transgender students who challenged the bans in the 2 states as violating the US Constitution and a federal anti-discrimination law. 25 other states have similar laws on the books. The Supreme Court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, backed other restrictions on transgender people in rulings issued last year. Republican President Donald Trump's administration defended the laws during the arguments. Conservative justices raised concerns about imposing a uniform rule on the entire country amid sharp disagreement and uncertainty over whether medications like puberty blockers or gender-affirming hormones eliminate male physiological advantages in sports. Questions by the liberal justices mostly signaled sympathy for the transgender challengers. Let's in fact listen in to some transgender athletes who have rallied against the ban.
It is exhausting to fight for your rights every day, to wake up in a country that I can represent at the highest level of my sport in international competition, but I am not safe here in the country that I represent. It is incredibly difficult to continue with these attacks, these persistent attacks on my community every single day. But at the same time, I know that this is what I was built for. This is the moment that I was made for.
Yeah, so at 19, it can be a little scary sometimes. I have a lot of hope right now. I think I have more hope, I have more joy than a lot of my peers, but I think that's because I have the community I do. It's because I have communities like the people outside the courthouse right now, but also people in my college town, at my hometown. I wish for and hope for a world where I don't have to be seen as brave for being myself, where I can just be trans and I don't have to advocate for myself, and that I can just be myself in every aspect of my being, that me playing sports isn't a controversial.
And we now have some breaking news coming in from Iran, where according to senior Iranian official, Tehran has reportedly asked its regional leaders, including Turkey, to prevent any military escalation by the United States. The official has also warned that Iran would strike US bases in the region if it is attacked by Washington. This comes as mass demonstrations continue across Iran, with the US-based human rights activist news agency reporting that 1,847 protesters have been killed so far. Just yesterday, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social urging Iranians to continue protesting and take control of state institutions. Trump also announced that he has cancelled all meetings with Iranian officials and will not engage with Tehran until it ends what he described as the senseless killings of protesters. All right, viewers, we now move on. Now, Turkey is in advanced talks to join a mutual defense alliance formed by Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, a move that could reshape regional security dynamics in the Middle East and beyond. The pact, which was signed by Riyadh and Islamabad in September last year, treats any attack on one member as an attack on all. This is a structure similar to NATO's collective defense clause, where Turkey is already a key member with the alliance's second largest military after the US. Sources familiar with the discussion say such a deal is very likely. If completed, the arrangement would link 3 US allied Muslim nations and could take place Turkey under Pakistan's nuclear umbrella. Saudi Arabia does not possess nuclear weapons, while Pakistan is the world's only nuclear-armed Muslim country. The original agreement had emerged amid heightened regional tensions following a failed Israeli strikes on Hamas leadership in Qatar, which armed Gulf states. Now, Turkey's possible entry reflects shared concerns among Ankara and Riyadh over Iran's nuclear ambitions, while Pakistan too has faced rising security pressures along its borders with Afghanistan and nuclear-armed India. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World. Here we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs and trends from around the world. Elon Musk's X is a platform that's now facing increasing scrutiny over the use of AI to generate content, including illicit, illegal, and exploitative images. To address these concerns, XAI restricted image generation to paying subscribers, while Musk claims users making illegal AI prompts will face the same consequences as uploading illegal files. The move comes amid growing pressure from international regulators. Indonesia became the first country to block Grok entirely, citing risks to human dignity and digital security. Australia, the United Kingdom, and European nations have also expressed concern, with investigations and warnings issued over child exploitation and non-consensual deepfakes. XAI's paywall and content restrictions are designed to limit harmful outputs, but technical challenges remain in monitoring millions of prompts in real time. Additionally, features like Grok's spicy mode have raised questions about whether the platform can remain family-friendly and brand safe. In response to regulatory pressure and transparency demands, Musk announced that X will make its new algorithm public within the next 7 days, including the full code behind how posts and ads are recommended. The platform will also release detailed developer notes every 4 weeks to help users and researchers track changes. Experts say open sourcing the algorithm may help address transparency concerns. Safeguards and content moderation will be essential to ensure the platform remains safe. Compliance with laws such as the European Union Digital Services Act and national obscenity rules will be critical to XAI's long-term strategy to avoid fines, potential bans, and further government intervention. Now, to talk about this further, joining us now is Andre Glock, an application security specialist from Leipzig in Germany. Andre brings expertise in full-stack web development and currently works on securing medical devices, ensuring both patient safety and the privacy of personal medical data. I'll start with my first question to you, Andre. What is and why do you think is Elon Musk deciding to make X's algorithm now public?
That is a good question. I think it's important to remember that Elon Musk already made the code for what it was once called Twitter back in 2023 public. So the algorithm is still published in the internet. However, it was not updated over these 3 years. And I think it's important that once again they are basically updating the information that they once published.
So is Elon Musk's decision to make X's algorithm public a genuine transparency effort or a tactical move in response to the European Union's $140 million fine? And how is X managing compliance and handling penalties under the European Union Digital Services Act?
I think it is a step in the right direction that they are publishing the algorithm now. However, we need to remember that the fine was imposed specifically on the lack of transparency in the issuing of blue checks on X, and also in the lack of transparency regarding the advertisements, because as we know, X has enabled many scam industries to advertise there with little oversight. So it is a transparency move, but probably also a tactical move. And in order to really comply with the EU Digital Compliance Act and avoid further fines, they would also need to provide more transparency in the blue checks and also in the practices regarding advertisement.
Dr. Grook, XAI has also restricted image generation to paying subscribers to fix the issue. Does putting a paywall in place actually stop the creation of harmful content?
Yeah, that is not going to stop. It will maybe limit the creation a little bit. However, that's certainly not something that is going to stop.
Sure, and how does the spicy mode on Grok align with X's stated goal of being a family-friendly or brand-safe environment?
So that seems to be, if not a misalignment, something that is on the edge of this alignment. Is really challenging. The content on the spicy mode really is maybe say a free-for-all. It does enable even things that could be considered illegal, let alone it's not family-friendly or brand-safe.
Dr. Glock, Musk is also claiming users will face the same consequences for illegal AI prompts as they would for uploading illegal files. Is it technically possible for X to monitor and report millions of private AI prompts to law enforcement in real time?
So it is technically possible to monitor and maybe issue flags that can be further checked by X. However, it's not possible to have a monitoring that will tell right away if something illegal is being happening or not. That is an extremely challenging activity. It would probably require millions of hours of real human checks to further verify if what is automatically flagged is really illegal or not.
Indonesia is now the first country to block Grok entirely. How does their definition of human dignity and security in a digital environment set a precedent for other nations with such strict obscenity laws?
So, as you know, Indonesia has almost a blanket ban on obscene content. And I think it's a logical step because the way AI generation works is based on training data. And if we have a model that is able to generate obscene content, we can probably infer that this model was trained on images that would be considered obscene and would probably be banned in Indonesia and also other countries that have a ban on obscene content. So in this way, maybe we could infer that if the model is using obscene content as training data, then it should also be banned and considered something that can generate obscene content.
All right, Mr. Glok, finally, with the rise of explicit content on X, several governments, including in India, have raised concerns. What do you think are some of the measures that can be taken by these governments to better control and regulate such content?
So that is a very technically challenging thing to do because as we've seen, for example, with harmful prompts in AI, for example, if I go and ask a text generator how to do a criminal activity, it will probably be blocked at first, but then I tell the AI generator that that is I basically convince it to give me this information by saying that I need this information maybe to prevent a crime from being committed. So as we can see, also as AI generators are being developed, that there are guardrails that are in place to prevent them from being used for illegal activity or generating explicit content. However, we can also see that users are also able to go over these guardrails. And this is basically a whack-a-mole game where they put one guardrail in check, but then this guardrail can be eventually bypassed. And this is just the way AI works because it's often generating things that are not predictable. And so there is no bulletproof way to ensure that these things are not generated.
All right, then, Dr. Andre Glok, thank you for joining us in this episode of Trending Tech. With that, viewers, it's a wrap on this Trending Tech episode. For more such updates and innovations from the world of tech, stay tuned to NewsX World.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous, and tonight Iran is burning. More than 648 people are dead and thousands are injured. Cities shaken by protests and a government that says this is not an uprising but a war. At the same time, the United States is issuing threats. President Donald Trump is talking about intervention, about force, about red lines. And Iran is responding with warnings of its very own. Europe is isolating Tehran, Israel is on alert, and the Middle East is on the edge. So, how did we get there? How close are we to a direct US-Iran clash? And why does history matter more than ever right now? Let's break it down. First, the scale of the crisis. Rights groups say more than 648 people have been killed since protests erupted across Iran. They began as economic demonstrations over inflation, job losses, and a collapsing currency. They quickly turned political. Chants against the clerical establishment echoed throughout the country. Calls for systemic change and direct challenges to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The state response was brutal. Security forces deployed live ammunition, mass arrests, internet blackouts, and a sweeping crackdown that Tehran defends as national security. This is where the United States enters the picture. US President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff when doing business with the US, effective immediately. This comes as the US President Donald Trump has repeatedly warned that if Iran continues using force against protesters, Washington could intervene. His language has been deliberately ambiguous. Very strong options, all tools on the table. For Iran, this is not rhetoric. This is a threat backed by history. Tehran's response has been sharp. Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf warned that any US attack would be met with what he called an unforgettable lesson. Let's take a listen into it.
و متکبر آمریکا میگویم که ما ملت ایران همان حرف حاج قاسم عزیزمان را به تو میزنیم. ای ترامپ قمارباز، ما حریف توییم، تو سرحسینیم، ما منتظریم، ما مرد میدان برای تو هستیم. بیا تا ببینی همه امکانات شما در منطقه نابود می شود. بیا تا ببینی چه بلایی بر سر پایگاه‌های آمریکایی و کشتی‌های آمریکایی و نیروهای آمریکایی در خواهد آمد. بیاد ترامپ متوهم، دروغ‌هایی که به تو میگویند باور نکن. به تو گفته بودند مشهد سقوط کرده، ولی مریدان امام رضا علیه السلام ایستادند تا پاسخ توهمات تو را بدهند.
And now even Europe is moving too. The European Parliament has taken one of its strongest steps yet. It has barred Iranian diplomats, officials and state representatives from entering its premises in Brussels, Strasbourg and Luxembourg. EU Parliament President Roberta Metsola said this goes beyond symbolism. Quote, "Those risking their lives on Iran's streets need more than words." This marks growing international isolation for Tehran. In retaliation, Iran's foreign ministry summoned the ambassadors of Britain, Germany, France and Italy. During the meeting, Iranian officials showed the envoys what they described as video evidence of violent acts by protesters, saying the actions went beyond peaceful demonstrations. But to understand why Iran reacts this way, you have to look back. US-Iran relations have been turbulent for decades. In 1953, the CIA backed a coup that ousted Iran's elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he nationalized Iran's oil. The US then supported the Shah's authoritarian rule for decades. And then, in 1979, the Islamic Revolution overthrew the Shah and turned Iran into an anti-American Islamic republic. The US Embassy hostage crisis sealed the break. The two countries have had no formal diplomatic relations since 1980. And this is critical. How many times has the US actually attacked Iran? In 1988, the US Navy shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing 290 civilians. Then moving on, in 2020, a US drone strike killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, in Baghdad. Iran retaliated by firing missiles at US bases in Iraq. And in 2025, under Operation Midnight Hammer, the most recent of all the incidents, the US struck Iran's nuclear facilities at Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan. Iran then responded by attacking a US base in Qatar. A ceasefire then followed, but the message is clear. The US has struck Iran before, and Iran has always struck back. So why is this moment different? Iran is under massive internal pressure. Sanctions have crippled the economy, inflation above 40%, currency collapse, a shrinking middle class. The government says the unrest is foreign engineered. However, the protests say this is about survival, and in the middle, a superpower weighing whether to turn pressure into force. So what happens next? A US strike could deter Tehran, or it could unify hardliners, end diplomacy and ignite a regional war involving Israel, US bases and Iran's proxies. Iran says it does not seek war, but is preparing for one. Joining us now is Melika Juvdan, a human rights activist. She joins us live from Oslo in Norway. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Let's get straight into this. And of course, this is a hugely developing situation hour by hour. From the outside, we can see the women of Iran predominantly take a leading role in the protests that have been shaking the country this month. What can you tell us about the ground reality of this perspective?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The women of Iran have been playing key roles in the uprisings this past few years. It started in 2019 and then in 2022, and now we see them on the ground leading on. And I personally believe this has to do with the fact that the Iranian Islamic regime has been in war with its own population for 47 years, specifically with women and minority groups. And those are the ones that are rising up and fighting it back now. But also that the Iranian resistance has been led by women, especially the largest opposition group is led by a woman called Mariam Rajavi. And what we see from the uprising on the ground, that it starts in a bazaar, in the bazaars in Tehran, and then quickly, within a few hours, it spreads around all over Iran, in small towns and great cities. So that there is a level of coordination between people throughout the country. There must be a network in place. That is what the Iranian opposition is saying, that there is a network in place. But this is not an uprising for somebody. It is an uprising against the ruling theocracy in Iran. So the people of Iran, those on the ground, they are the ones to decide their own future. And I personally believe that their future will be in the long run, not immediately now due to all the killings, but in the long run, there is true hope for equality in Iran, but also for minority rights. Unfortunately, there has been falsified videos spread on social media, and they have been picked up by some media outlets around the world internationally as well, where there seems to be this this illusion of that there are some people who are calling for the return of the dictatorship of Reza Pahlavi, about the Pahlavi dynasty, and this is definitely not true. These videos are being spread by Iranian intelligence ministry to offset the balance on the ground, and to so that the international media will and the people on the ground, minorities, will think of this as a conspiracy for the return of the Shah, which this is not. This is an uprising for equality, for women, for minority rights, for a democratic and secular republic in Iran.
And we've seen economic measures put on recently in the past 24 hours by the Trump administration. We've seen that 25% tariffs, and we've also seen Europe act on the economic front as well. Would you say that the regime of sanctions placed on Iran has contributed to the crisis, both in the short term that we've just seen and in the long term, the E3 sanctions, etc.?
Well, to a certain extent, it has, absolutely. And the truth of the matter is that whoever trades with Iran will be filling the pockets of the Revolutionary Guards that are murdering their own people. So because they own such a great part of the large amount of the Iranian private sector and the Iranian non-private sector. So you cannot have vast trades with Iran without filling the pockets of the security apparatus, those Revolutionary Guards that are now murdering their own people. So the economic collapse in Iran is not due first and foremost to sanctions from outside. It's first and foremost due to corruption and mismanagement from within the regime.
And of course, on the ground, of course, information is extremely hard to get to right now due to the internet blackout, which has now hit its 80th hour. However, we just heard some news in from the Reuters news agency just a couple of minutes ago that Iran has confirmed some 2,000 people dead in the protests now from an Iranian official, blaming terrorists for the deaths of civilians and security personnel. What more can you tell us about the humanitarian situation on the ground?
I believe the death toll is more than 3,000. So there are several thousand people being murdered by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, by the Basij militia, by the security apparatus all around the country. And this is not what Iranian regime is trying to portray. This is like agents within the group, within the rioters, or going about and shooting each other. This is of course absolutely false. They're trying to portray this as a conspiracy from Israel or a conspiracy from US. Well, there is truth to the fact that actors are trying, regional actors, and the US is trying to figure out what exactly they're supposed to be doing on the ground in Iran. But the truth of the matter is it's an uprising by the Iranian people for their own freedom, and they are paying a heavy price. They are not murdering themselves. They are being murdered by the crackdown of this Islamic Revolutionary Guards and the state apparatus. This is the Iranian Islamic regime killing its own people.
we're looking at a plethora of options that could happen. Of course, the United States might intervene militarily. Of course, the security forces could expand oppression on the protesters. However, whatever the future of this holds, do you think that these protests here are different to the ones that we've seen in previous years? And what will this say about the future of human rights in Iran?
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindhu.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has dismissed remarks from Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen after he reiterated Greenland's commitment to Denmark. Asked about the comments from Prime Minister Nielsen, Trump said, "I don't know who he is, but that will be a big problem for him." Bill and Hillary Clinton say they will not be testifying in the House Oversight Committee's Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee threatens to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify. The planet logged its third hottest year on record in 2025, extending a run of unprecedented heat, according to US researchers and European Union climate monitors. US President Donald Trump has now stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into the Venezuelan oil market. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protesters in Iran has crossed 2,500. US President Donald Trump tells Iranians to keep protesting, says help is on the way as US mouth strikes. Iran says US seeking pretext for military intervention. Iran officials say over 2,500 killed in unrest. Trump says day of reckoning and retribution coming to Minnesota, where 37-year-old Rennie Nicole Good was killed by an ICE agent as protests continue in Minneapolis. Apple signs multi-year deal with Google to fix Siri with Gemini, which the company promised at WWDC 2024 but has since been delayed. Apple had promised 3 big upgrades to Siri to take it on par with rivals like Gemini and ChatGPT. Alright viewers, let's start with news now from Iran, where according to reports, the nationwide shutdown of the internet by the authorities there, which activists fear is aimed at masking the true scale of a crackdown on protests, has now lasted over 132 hours. Meanwhile, Iran's judiciary chief has vowed fast-track trials for suspects arrested over a wave of protests, which the authorities have dismissed as riots. Listen in.
بعد کوکتلا رو کی میساخت؟
من که خبر ندارم.
پس اینا رو کی آورده تو کارخونه؟
چا؟
اینا پس کی آورده اونجا؟
نمیدونم.
که یک این
Meanwhile, according to a senior Iranian official, Tehran has reportedly asked its regional leaders, including Turkey, to prevent any military escalation by the United States. The official has also warned that Iran would strike US bases in the region if it is attacked by Washington. Saul Satka, who is a political commentator from Tel Aviv, now joins me in this discussion. Saul, thank you very much for making yourself available for this conversation. Now, it's crucial how Iran and its supreme leader has gone on with executions of demonstrators, protesters who are not even leaders but mere participants, expedited their trials, given them really no time to appeal. And a man as young as 26-year-old is going to be executed today. Do you think these kind of executions and broadcast confessions is going to quell the protests, or it's going to fuel the fire?
If the Iranian regime executes over 1,000 people a year for various trivial crimes or thought crimes or free speech violations. So this is nothing new. Their justice system is absolutely corrupt and absolutely brutal. Ditto with its jail system. The regime is clearly in a panic. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how it can at the one time suppress the protests and at the same time not anger the West sufficiently to ensure that they don't actually come in and throw them out, and they know they can do. So they're really in a pickle.
Of course it is. And do you think the internet blackout is really in place? Because Trump has already asked Musk to help with Starlink, and then people are already uploading visuals and their protests, especially women, on social media.
Yeah, so it's unclear how much of the stuff coming out of Iran is actually contemporary. Certainly videos of piles and piles of dead bodies, but it's much less than was there before. There are some people who are getting things out via certain means, perhaps also by taking actual evidence out of the country. Other people are finding ways to bypass it. There are a few hundred Starlink terminals provided by Elon Musk in Iran at the moment, while the Iranian regime are currently actively trying to jam them, so even they won't work. It's very important for the Iranian regime. Their top priority is to shut down the internet, because the internet does two things. Number one, it allows all the protesters to coordinate with each other. And number two, and much more dangerously for them, it allows them to get out the evidence of their own repression, which will further radicalize the population. So absolutely critical for them is to shut down the internet. At some point, we're going to find out that this kind of evil regime in the world is unsustainable in the information age. And they know that, which is why they've taken their people back 40 years to a period when the internet did not exist. Because under those circumstances, they know how to suppress the people. They don't know how to suppress the people in the information age. So that is a light in this whole debacle, this whole disgraceful situation that's happening in Iran. A brutal, brutal massacre that's continuing under the eyes of the world as the Iranians try to blind everyone. The light at the end of the tunnel is that for them and for all other similar regimes that exist or may exist in the future, the way to get rid of them is now clear. Simply, you have to let freedom ring, you have to give people information, and these regimes become instantly and inevitably unsustainable.
Yeah. Saul, how do you see the latest development that's coming in from Iran, which says that it's going to work with regional leaders? like Turkey, and they're going to strike the US bases should US launch strikes.
I can absolutely assure you that neither the Turks or the Qataris or the Saudis or anyone else, all of whom are allies of the United States, are going to be helping Iran to retaliate against the United States. The Iranians in the past, when Soleimani was killed by the Americans, when the Americans bombed their nuclear program one night in June, on every previous occasion, the Iranians have promised major retaliation. And each time, they have sent a symbolic number of missiles at an American base, while telegraphing a warning in advance to make sure that no American people were killed. Because the Iranians are smart enough to know that if they kill any American servicemen, the Americans can retaliate with such overwhelming force and so fast that they won't even know what's coming. So the last thing the Iranians want to do is to get into a shooting war with the United States. They desperately want to try and de-escalate tensions. There are people in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, and in Turkey who are quite comfortable with the Iranian people, their 92 million population living under oppression, because they would rather not have that kind of geopolitical competitor. The Turks and the Saudis would very much like not to have a powerful, strong, free Iran, because, among other things, that will be an appeal to their own population to want the same kind of things, which they do not have. But at the same time, the Qataris' entire existence, the Qataris, if you will recall, only have a population of 300 people. The Qataris are some of the most incompetent people in the world, but what they do have is vast supplies of gas, and also 2.5 million indentured servants, mostly from India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. What they need a geopolitical role. And for them to have a geopolitical role, they need to play a game. They need to play the good cop, bad cop game between the West and the Iranians, and all the Iranian proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah. As the Iranian proxies have been dismantled, all that's left is Iran. And if the Iranian regime is dismantled too, which looks increasingly likely, then where is Qatar? They're trying to play a good cop, bad cop game, but they don't have a bad cop anymore. And suddenly they're irrelevant and not much use to anyone. And the great fear for the Qataris is that the Americans will no longer feel a need to maintain a presence in the Middle East to the same degree, and could easily roll back their American base on Qatari soil, which is the only thing protecting Qatar from their Saudi tribal rivals to the south.
All right, sure. Saul, do continue to stay on with me, please, as we proceed. Because let's also tell you that the Israeli military is now saying that all 6 gunmen involved in a firefight in western Rafah on Tuesday were killed during the exchange of fire. According to the IDF, troops from the 7th Armored Brigade identified 6 armed individuals approaching their positions on the Israeli-controlled side of the Yellow Line in southern Gaza. After the suspects were spotted, Israeli tanks moved in and opened fire. The gunmen responded, triggering a sustained firefight that also involved Israeli air support. The military says searches conducted after the clash confirmed all 6 suspects were killed and weapons were recovered from their bodies. The IDF says the incident took place in an area under Israeli operational control and describes the encounter as a serious violation of the October ceasefire agreement. The military added it will continue to act against any attempts by armed groups in Gaza to attack Israeli forces or civilians. Saul, I request you to join me back in the discussion here. Of course, once again, we see the ceasefire being violated. This is coming right after Netanyahu and Donald Trump had met over the Gaza ceasefire. What does this really say about the course that can take on?
It was quite clear from Trump's meeting with Netanyahu that they are on the same page, that Hamas only ever met most of the requirements for the first stage of the ceasefire, which was to release the hostages. They released all of them except for one. The body of Rangvili remains in captivity.
Yeah.
But they have begun to disarm themselves and to close themselves down as a military organization. On the contrary, they are desperately trying to rearm and train new fighters, as we've seen. They maintain daily operations against the IDF, which almost universally fail and end in the killing of all their men. So the prospect of the ceasefire moving to stage 2 is absolutely minimal. There's no way that Hamas, a genocidal jihadi organization that is bent on murder in the name of God, is going to willingly hand over their weapons to the infidel. There are enough people within Hamas who are not at all pragmatic and absolutely do prefer to die in battle than surrender. As a result, there's absolutely no prospect in the foreseeable future that Hamas will be disarmed. There's only one way to disarm Hamas, and that is phonetically. People need to go in and fight them. They need to continue fighting house to house, building to building, until there are no more left, or until there are no people with guns anymore. The prospect of happening is very low, because Israel is currently quite satisfied with having Hamas still controlling 40% of Gaza, including the entire population, across a demarcated line, because Israel's only concerned that Hamas can't attack their population. And it probably isn't worth their while to go in there and root them out at the cost of some lives, perhaps hundreds of Israeli soldiers. So the status quo is fine for Israel in large part. And at the same time, if Israel isn't sufficiently motivated to get rid of Hamas, I can assure you there's no one else in the world, not the Turks, not the Saudis, nobody, not the Pakistanis who have been talking about going in as a peacekeeping force, nobody is going to bleed to fight Hamas if Israel won't. So the ceasefire essentially achieved what it needed to for Israel. It's frozen the conflict. Israel's got its hostages back. And it has achieved nothing for Hamas, who have no prospect of ever breaking out from behind the barricades that Israel has set up for them.
What about countries like Qatar that unconspicuously back groups like Hamas? What kind of action should be, mulled, and why has that action not come as of now?
Right, so this is the question. So it was Qatar, chief among the guarantors of the deal with Hamas, who promised President Trump that they would ensure that Hamas actually stuck to the deal. And while the first phase, the release of the hostages, went more or less to plan, there was always no prospect of the second phase coming to pass. And I think everyone now recognizes this and is just happy the hostages are out. Qatar essentially made promises that they could not keep. And my guess is they will pay a diplomatic price for that with the system.
Okay, Saul, thanks very much then for joining me in this discussion. And with that, viewers, we are going to proceed. Palestinians in Gaza are restoring to mud and rubble to rebuild homes that were destroyed in months of conflict, as lack of access to construction material leaves families with few options. Men in Khan Yunus are mixing mud and water and stack stones salvaged from bombed out houses to rebuild parts of their homes. Some Palestinians have responded. Let's listen in what they had to say.
طينة للناس ببنوها بنا دورهم انهدت بودي لهم طينة عشان يبنوها زي ما انت شايف وعد اول مرة نشتغل الشغلانة هذه بس في الحرب اشتغلناها وحد سعرها يعني 50 شيكل زي ما انت شايف بنتعب في طينة مش رمل.
يخلي الناس تلجأ بالطينة لأن لا يوجد كرفانات في قطاع غزة، لأن إسرائيل منعت دخول الكرفانات والزينجو وما شابه ذلك والخشب والرأس محمد، والناس لجأت تلم الأحجار من بيوتها المدمرة وتجيب طينة وتبني فيه عشان هذاك علشان انه تحمي نفسها من البرد ومن الصيف.
كنا طبعا قاعدين في خيام وانا الى خاطب تقريبا سنه وشهر، فالى فتره بحاول ان انا اجمع حق خيمه، ما تمكنتش ان انا اشتري خيمه بسبب غلاء الخيام، وصل اسعارها يعني فوق ال 2000 و 2500 شيكل. فقلت انا اجي اصلح بيتنا واقعد فيه بالطينه. جمعت احجار من حوالينا، من الردم، من الدور المقصوفه، جمعت احجار مكسوره، جمعت طينه شويه شويه، بديت اضبط في البيت.
All right, and moving ahead, 2 people have died and several were wounded in Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian border regions. In Rostov-on-Don, a drone strike caused a fire in a residential building, leaving 1 man dead among the charged remains. 4 others, including a 4-year-old child, were injured in separate strikes throughout the region, which also sparked fires in industrial areas. Moreover, in Belgorod, another border region, a woman was killed and a man wounded when a drone struck their vehicle. Sources say that this area has seen frequent retaliatory drone attacks and has also recently experienced a massive power outage. This comes as Ukrainian forces said that Russia launched overnight attacks on Ukraine with 113 drones and 3 ballistic missiles fired. And we now move to news from South Asia, where Pakistan has entered an agreement with a firm linked to World Liberty Financial, the primary crypto venture associated with US President Donald Trump's family, to explore the use of World Liberty's stablecoin for cross-border payments. The deal represents one of the first publicly announced tie-ups between World Liberty, a crypto-based finance platform launched in September 2024, and a sovereign state. It also comes amid a warming of ties between President of the US and Pakistan. According to reports, under the agreement, WLF will collaborate with Pakistan's central bank to integrate its USD1 stablecoin into a regulated digital payments framework, enabled to function alongside Pakistan's existing digital currency infrastructure. Fakhar Yusufzai, who is a Pakistani journalist, now joins me in this discussion from Islamabad. Thank you, Fakhar, for joining me here. Fakhar, how is this tie-up going to be impacted once Trump demits office?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. Actually, from last June 2025, when the Pakistani Army Chief General Asim Munir met to the President of America, after that the situation is going, I will say that, going to change. Lots of things are going on, but I think so. The main point is, as a Pakistani journalist, I will raise the benefit of the Pakistani nation, or for the national interest of Pakistan. What is going on for the national interest of Pakistan? This is very important. Actually, nowadays we have seen Mr. Trump. He is imposing all the things on those countries which we say that this is the friend of US, or this is the friend of some other countries. I think so. Crypto is a digital payment system, or the digital currency, very important. But as well as I have seen the report issued by Reuters and Pakistani media also covering this important development. Actually, the country like Pakistan, we have many problems in our system. It is involved with the banking system as well as to the financial system, because I'm covering lots of issues which related to the Pak-US relation. But I think so in this type of relation, America have an upper hand in every aspect which is related. If it is related to the defense, it is related to the finance, it is related to the rare earth minerals. I think so the Pakistani nation or the Pakistani people not getting any benefit from all these things. Actually, I have seen photographs or the video some short time ago. The Pakistani Field Marshal was there, the Pakistani Finance Minister was there, the Pakistani Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister was there. Of course, the Deputy Prime Minister and Prime Minister should be there, as well as the Finance Minister. But what about the Chief Saab, or the CDF Chief of Defense Forces? What he is doing there? Because this is not his job, I think so. It's very strange for me, but it is going on because Donald Trump is directly dealing not with the with a political government in Pakistan. He is dealing with Rawalpindi. And I think so this deal is also associated or between the Rawalpindi and Washington.
All right. But how is this deal going to affect the bureaucracy and the executive in Pakistan? Because with crypto, the chances of corruption and dark web payments are a real threat. Does Pakistan have those regulations in place for the use of these cryptocurrencies?
Actually, I have seen from last 1.5 years that the Pakistan Federal Investigation Agency, FIA, have raid on so many offices in Pakistan, in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. And they have a raid against those people which is associated with this type of payments or this type of businesses. I think so. The Pakistani government want it in a legal way, but it will take time. Of course, as you said, that bureaucracy or the dark web, as we know about that, it is of course very threatening the country like Pakistan, because in Pakistan our system need so many things to be improved even in 2026, especially if I talk about our Pakistani banking system, which is not that much secure, which should be. This is the main thing. And the other one, the Pakistani people, I think so. They like the physical instrument. I mean to say the currency note. If you want to say to someone that I will pay via bank or via this, they will tell you that please give me cash. This is the main problem for the Pakistani society, as well as the Pakistani economy. Of course, we have facing so many problems right now. This time, we have the poverty problem. We have a political instability. We have the $1 billion of debt payment, which is due from different countries, especially from International Monetary Fund. I think so. These are the main things which we should focus on. That the crypto or the other currency. Of course, the world is going towards the digitalization. But why not the other country are going for the crypto? I will say that why not India is going for that, or the other Asian countries are not going? And why the Trump administration or the Trump family is not interested with the other countries for these type of things? I think so. I'm sorry to say, but I think so. There is something fishy.
All right, Fakhar, thank you very much then for joining me in this discussion. Viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the World Report on NewsX World. Thanks for watching here for all news and updates.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
we would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump has dismissed remarks from Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederiksen Nielsen after he reiterated Greenland's commitment to Denmark. Asked about the comments from Prime Minister Nielsen, Trump said, "I don't know who he is, but that will be a big problem for him." Bill and Hillary Clinton have refused to testify in a Republican-led congressional investigation of the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, saying it was a partisan exercise. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung toured the Ryuji Temple in Nara with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi following a summit between the two leaders. The planet logged its third hottest year on record in 2025, extending a run of unprecedented heat, according to US researchers and European Union climate monitors. US President Donald Trump has stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into the Venezuelan oil market. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protests in Iran has crossed 2,000. All right, viewers, US President Donald Trump has reacted to remarks by the Premier of Greenland expressing a reference or preference to remain with Denmark. Trump dismissed his statements and said that the remarks could be a big problem for the Premier. Trump's comments come after Greenland Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen said the self-governed Danish territory wants to remain part of Denmark rather than join the United States. Greenlandic and Danish foreign ministers will meet US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington today after renewed threats of taking control over Greenland. Let's first listen in to Trump's statement.
Well, that's their problem. That's their problem. I disagree with them. I don't know who he is, don't know anything about him, but that's going to be a big problem.
All right, I have Matthew Wadham, who's an American journalist from Washington, D.C., joining me in this conversation. Matthew, thanks very much for joining me here at NewsX World. How do you assess this development, especially when Greenlanders have made it clear that they neither want to be Americans nor Danes? How is Greenlanders and its prime minister now saying that it wants to remain with Denmark weigh in as far as the people of the island are concerned?
Well, I guess they're not. I guess Greenland's not going to become a protectorate of the United States. But as I've said before, I don't think President Trump was doing this because was putting pressure on Greenland because he necessarily wanted to take over their vast, cold, empty country. He was doing it to wrest concessions from them so that American companies can have access to the mineral wealth that is on Greenland, and also to improve America's military position. I think they have some bases on Greenland, but I think President Trump wants to have more because he fears that Russia and China are anxious to move to expand their power in the Arctic region, and they want to have sway with Greenland. And this is the way China has been operating for decades now with its Belt and Road Initiative, going into countries all across the world, like in, Central America and Africa and so on, and building infrastructure and lending them money that they have no hope of paying back, in order to expand their influence. So I think President Trump is right to be concerned. If Greenland doesn't become, the 51st state of the U.S., or it doesn't become, a protectorate of the United States, then, or colony, if you prefer, then, at least from President Trump's perspective, he will have gotten some concessions out of them that are going to benefit the United States. So, he likes to yell and scream and be tough, and it's part of his negotiating strategy. The man considers himself to be a master negotiator, the author of the best-selling book, The Art of the Deal. And this is how, to use that expression, he likes to psych out the other side and trash talk, to use another American expression. And this is how he gets business done. So, as uncomfortable as it may be for some people to watch, I wish he wasn't threatening Greenland all the time, but I don't have any say in it.
All right,
he might he's thinking of offering money to individual Greenlanders, $100,000, which would be a bargain, to get Greenland's loyalty for $100,000 per person.
Yeah, but the people have made it clear that money is not that's going to work for them. They value their sovereignty more. And I'd now also invite Collins Chong-Yu-Keat in the discussion here. He's a foreign affairs, security and strategy analyst from University Malaya in Kuala Lumpur. Collins, thanks very much for joining me. How do you wish to respond to Trump's remarks when he says that if he doesn't acquire Greenland, Russia or China will? Does that make his acquisition bid any better?
Well, Greenland has always been critical for the security of the U.S., of course, also for the Arctic. And he is right when he pointed out that China and Russia are taking over Greenland now. There's no deterrence being put into the picture. We have seen how Denmark has basically no deterrent capacity, And by saying that it's a big problem for him, he's not talking about personalities, he's talking about geopolitical consequences for Greenland to wisely choose now. And of course, it's not only about minerals, not only about, of course, the economic resources, but also critically is for the missile defense coverage for the US against Russia, and to checkmate also the polar ambitions by China. The Arctic has now turned into a new contest, a new front for geopolitical confrontation, not only with Russia, but also with China. So it's not only about, accelerating US hard power, but also to ensure that the future of the Arctic, the future of the security of the United States has now, been, at the control of Washington. And, for Greenland to choose Denmark over the US, the leader of Greenland is now betting on EU diplomacy, is now betting on the solidarity of the Nordic, platform. Also, of course, on the legal frameworks, on the notion of international law. But Trump is basically reminding him that international law does not simply stop the threat, the risk of hypersonic missiles, but raw power, raw deterrence capacity. All these do stop, the risk of, and all-out conflict over Greenland. So the message by Trump is simple: that you have to align with U.S. security now for protection, for investments, for the future. For you to reject that will be, of course, to risk yourself to this exposure to Russia and to China. And of course, also Denmark simply does not have the hard power capacity to defend Greenland. Neither does Europe. Only Washington under Trump will have that. And this is simply a stark warning to Denmark, to Greenland, of course, also to tell Moscow and Beijing to back off from the backyard of the US in the Western Hemisphere, and to back off from the Arctic.
Collins, why do you think then this statement has now come in from Greenland's Prime Minister, especially when 5 political parties had issued a statement to say that they don't want to be American or Danes either? Why now Denmark over US for Greenland's Prime Minister?
Well, he's of course, also betting on the local sentiments, and as I've stated earlier, he's betting on the larger picture of, relying on the legal frameworks, on the sanctity of the international law, and the readiness by Europe and NATO to come to its defense. But I think it's a futile effort. Of course, the solidarity of the European nations, and when Trump has stated that he's keen to ensure the importance of Greenland, as we have seen now with the case of Venezuela and maybe potentially in Iran, Trump, is not playing games, and when he's keen on something, he has been adamant on getting that. Of course, the initial timeline now is to use diplomacy, and Rubio has been at the forefront. But as he has stated, one way or the other, Greenland can either do it the easy way or the hard way. And it is also not only because of the safety and security of the US, but also for the security of Greenland in the future, that it is better off for Greenland to choose Washington Denmark or Europe to safeguard Greenland against future threats. And this is an easy choice for Greenland to make. And of course, also it is a stark reminder that the era where the safety net being provided by the international law is now over. And this is the era of the potential aggressions by unchecked adversaries, and only raw deterrence can put a stop to that. And Trump is setting that red line, and he's adamant to ensure that it remains that way.
All right, sure. Thanks, Collins. Do stay on with me as we proceed. Request Matthew also to continue to be with us. Moving ahead, viewers, let's cover news now on the Epstein files. What we're learning in the latest is that Bill and Hillary Clinton have refused to testify before a Republican-led House investigation into the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. They have called the probe partisan in nature. In a letter to House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, the Clintons have said that they would not participate further, arguing the inquiry was being used for political purposes rather than any genuine oversight. Meanwhile, Chairman James Comer has responded by stressing that the committee's subpoena of Bill Clinton was approved on a bipartisan basis, with some Democrats voting alongside Republicans. He has further added that the panel was not accusing the former president of wrongdoing, but simply wanted answers about his past contacts with Epstein, which includes repeated travel on Epstein's private aircraft after leaving office. Let's listen in.
Well, I think everyone knows by now Bill Clinton did not show up. And I think it's important to note that this subpoena was voted on in a bipartisan manner by this committee. This wasn't something that I just issued as chairman of the committee. This was voted on by the entire committee in a unanimous vote of the House Oversight Committee to subpoena former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton's supposed to show up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. But with respect to the former president, he did not show up today. One reason I think most Americans want President Clinton to answer some questions is because he visited the White House. Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House 17 times while Bill.
The Oversight Committee is now moving ahead with steps to formally hold Bill Clinton in contempt, with Comer signaling further action in the coming days. Moreover, in a separate letter shared by Hillary Clinton on social media, the Clintons have clarified that they had already tried to provide what limited information they possessed. The Clintons have also accused James Comer of selective enforcement, pointing out that while 8 people were subpoenaed, 7 were dismissed without being questioned. The Clintons also claim that a legal analysis prepared by 2 law firms concludes that the subpoenas are legally invalid. They also point out the inconsistency of the House Oversight Committee, alleging that its chairman took a different position on subpoena authority when it involved a sitting president in the recent past. I invite Matthew Wadham, American journalist from Washington, D.C., to join me back in the discussion here. Matthew, what is the message that one could take from their refusal? And also, what does it mean for investigation going ahead as far as Clintons are concerned?
Well, I guess the Clintons think that they're above the law, so they don't have to answer a subpoena from the United States Congress. So, this is not at all surprising behavior from them. In fact, it's par for the course. The previous Congresses, Democratic-controlled Congresses, subpoenaed Trump advisors Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, and they refused to comply with the subpoenas, and they went to prison. And so, there's no reason why Bill and Hillary Clinton can't answer subpoenas. And if they don't, it's going to be hard for Bill Clinton to claim presidential immunity, because it's related to Epstein Island. It's not related to anything that he did as an official act as president, so he can't claim presidential immunity from that. He's going to have to cooperate with Congress, and right now he's just stalling and thinking that because he's Bill Clinton, he can get away with it. But he's going to have to comply, and I think he'll find that out in the coming days.
All right, sure. All right.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has dismissed remarks from Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen after he reiterated Greenland's commitment to Denmark. Asked about the comments from Prime Minister Nielsen, Trump has said that "I don't know who he is, but that will be a big problem for him." Bill and Hillary Clinton has said that they will not be testifying in the House Oversight Committee's Jeffrey Epstein investigation. Chairman of the House Oversight Committee threatens to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify. The planet logged its third hottest year on record in 2025, extending a run of unprecedented heat, according to US researchers and EU climate monitors. US President has now stated that a US takeover will be great for Venezuela as American oil companies formulate their re-entry strategy into the Venezuelan oil market. Independent human rights groups have stated that the death toll from the crackdown on protests in Iran has crossed 2,500 people. US President Donald Trump tells Iranians to keep protesting, says help is on the way as US mulls strikes. Iran says US seeking pretext for military intervention. Iran officials says 2,500 people are killed in the unrest. Trump says day of reckoning and retribution coming to Minnesota, where 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good was killed by an ICE agent as protests continue in Minneapolis. Apple signs multi-year deal with Google to fix Siri with Gemini, which the company promised at WWDC 2024 but has since been delayed. Apple had promised 3 big upgrades to Siri to take it in par with rivals like Gemini and ChatGPT. Now for this hour, we start with Iran. According to a senior Iranian official, Tehran has reportedly asked its regional leaders, including Turkey, to prevent any military escalation by the United States. The official has also warned that Iran would strike U.S. bases in the region if it is attacked by Washington. This comes as mass demonstrations continue across Iran, with the U.S.-based human rights activists news agency reporting that 1,847 protesters have been killed so far. Just yesterday, U.S. President Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social, urging Iranians to continue protesting and take control of the state institutions. Trump has also announced that he has canceled all meetings with Iranian officials and will not engage with Tehran until it ends what he described as the senseless killings of the protesters. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Gedalia Blum. He's in Middle East Affairs analyst, joins us live from LA. Thank you very much, Mr. Blum, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Now, as situations escalate, and it seems like Trump has, closed that door of diplomacy, what should we be focusing on, and what do you think could happen?
Well, I think closing the door on the diplomacy is actually moving closer to a solution. I'll tell you is that the Middle East, especially when it comes to the interacting with the Western world, diplomacy has been used not as a means to come to a solution, but a weapon to use for delay tactics in order for them to continue in whichever direction that they were going to in the first place. And we see this in countless examples. And I think that it's very clear that Donald Trump is not willing to play that game. Number one, he's got 3 years left in his presidency. He's looking to create a legacy. Not only that, but he's also, at the last years of his life. I don't think he wants to even waste 2 minutes through diplomatic channels that are not going to further his goal for success and a successful legacy for his presidency. And so I think actually closing those diplomatic channels is actually what's going to create the pressure that's needed for any kind of solution, which I honestly don't think that it's going to have anything to do with the regime. The toothpaste is out of the tube, as they say. You can't push it back in. And despite the fact that we don't know the exact numbers of the people on the streets protesting against the regime, we do know that there is a significant PR campaign in support of the protesters, of the revolutionaries against the regime. And it's time for this 47 year oppressive, oppressiveness to end already. And I think that by closing these diplomatic channels is actually a sign to the people on the ground to say that we are with you and we're not going to continue to prop up an illegitimate regime while they continue to rule over you, to kill you, and to suppress your basic human rights.
Right. As you mentioned that the legacy that Trump is trying to leave, but Iranian people at the end of the day are not the voters that he's seeking to, right? So why do you think he's prioritizing this instead of, the domestic politics such as the ICE shootings and ICE protests against ICE agents, ICE immigration crackdown, and Jeffrey Epstein, so many cases that could get Trump more voting. What do you think, what's his motive here?
I mean, I think his motive is not for necessarily his own personal position in the politic of domestic politics in the United States. I think that he sees himself as a world leader, and with a world leader, he understands that, especially in the recent.
We might have lost our guest while we check the connection. We'll be moving on to our next read. Thank you very much, Mr. Blum, for sharing that insight once again. Now we have a breaking news. The Indian embassy in Tehran has issued a fresh advisory for all Indian nationals in Iran. Citizens, including students, pilgrims, tourists, and business travelers, are being urged to leave the country by any available means, including commercial flights, amid the evolving situation in Iran. The embassy has asked everyone to exercise caution, avoid protests, and stay updated through local media. All travel and identity documents should be kept handy. Now we move the focus back on to Iran. Iranian authorities have sentenced 26-year-old protester Erfan Soltani to death, a move rights groups say could lead to the first execution linked to the latest wave of anti-Khamenei protests. Soltani is an ordinary citizen from Fardis, near Tehran, with no leadership role in the demonstrations. He was arrested earlier this month during a street protest and charged with waging war against God, a capital offense under Iranian law. According to activists, he was denied access to a lawyer and put through a rushed judicial process. His family has been told the sentence could be carried out at any time. The case has sparked international concern, with rights groups warning it may set a precedent for more death sentences as unrest continues across Iran. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Gedalia Blum. He's a Middle East Affairs analyst, joins us live from Eli. Thank you very much, Mr. Blum, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, can you tell us a little bit about this particular individual who's put into death sentence by Iranian government?
I mean, I think it's symbolic. I think it's symbolic that the Iranian regime understands that these protests are decentralized. There's no leadership, there's no infrastructure, there's no funding, there's no outside influence, as much as they would like to say that it's America and Israel influenced. This was grassroots. This was a response to their complete and utter malpractice in running a state. And I think that this execution of this individual with no standing is very illustrative of the way that the regime actually operates. And the fact that they continue to operate this in the face of the world with whose eyes are all on Iran, I think it's very telling. And I think this goes back to why President Trump is ended all diplomatic channels, is because this is who they really are. They really believe that they are executing people in protecting God's image. And this is an evil. This is an evil in this world that is not only being branched out through their proxies and Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, but it's a terror that's creating so much fear in on the ground in Iran.
Mr. Blum, when you say they, you mean the regime, right? You're differentiating between the regime and the people.
No, absolutely. The people are the victims. The regime. This is how 40,000 IRGC members could control a whole country, is not through brute force, but through brute fear. And what they do is they take somebody off the street and they publicize that this is just an ordinary person and that he stood up against the regime. And now we're going to set up the cranes and hang him in public view and let him sit there for a number of days so everybody can understand what happens to you as a normal person when you speak out against the regime. And when they put that level of fear into people, that's how they keep control, and that's what they're trying to maintain, that level of control. But like I said before, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. There's no pushing it back. The people on the ground are so large in numbers that they don't feel that they are going to be individually isolated and picked out instead, but they feel that they do have this like kind of mob strength where you have anonymity, but you do have the strength in numbers to walk down the streets in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people at the same time.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And Mr. Blum, as you also highlighted that the Iranian government blames outsiders instead of blaming themselves for the oppression of the people over there. They blame Israel, they blame US. How is this news covered in Israel, and how does Israeli government sees Iranian regime continuously pointing fingers at themselves for their own mistake, outsiders,
I mean, listen, we see it as obviously a falsity, almost laughable. It's almost satirical that they're sitting there executing their own people, shooting them in the eye, shooting them in the face on purpose in order to create these scars and to kill them. And then they turn around and say that this is some sort of like Mossad conspiracy. We've seen this forever, and we see this through all fascists and all dictatorships and all Islamist rulers who are not free societies, but fear societies who oppress their own people. And the only way for their people to stay with them is for these leaders to create an enemy from outside. And when you create an enemy from outside, you could always blame all the hardships of the people that they're responsible for on somebody external. And so this is something that we've heard for the last 47 years. We hear it from many other nations. North Korea, we heard it from Venezuela. We still hear it from Venezuela. We hear it from these fear societies that they need to have an enemy outside to blame. And we know this game, and so nobody takes their rhetoric seriously. And I don't think, not Israelis, not Iranians. Everybody, it's very clear what they're doing, and they're desperate. And this accusation of external players is just a very clear illustration of their desperation.
And Mr. Blum, we saw a few years ago the Mahsa Amini protest, which led to some kind of changing in the women's head coverings, scarves, and hijab laws that were forcefully applied to Iranian people in Iran. Do you think that the death penalty of Mr. Erfan Soltani would have a similar effect? And just maybe Iranian government will just maybe change a little bit rules here and there, and then just wait for this protest to fizzle out. What's the difference if that were to happen? The same thing that was to happen today regarding this protest that's ongoing, and then the difference with Mahsa Amini effect from previous protest which we saw in Iran. It was also huge.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a very significant difference between these two protests. The previous one that you mentioned was about human rights issues, in which everybody, of course, is very much attuned to and wants to see human rights for their fellow man. On the other side of it, though, is that fear, that level of fear that the government puts into people, that nobody wanted to come en masse onto the streets and put themselves on the line and becoming the next victim. What's different here is the economic variable, which is what actually triggered these protests, which is the complete mismanagement of the currency, of water management, of energy, of all these different, they converged. And all of a sudden now we have the university students are the ones that actually triggered and joined in on this ideological protest. So I see this as much different. I don't see going back to this, especially with the Iranian regime's surveillance state, in which they are monitoring every single person as much as they can who's on the street. And I think that these people understand that once they showed their face, once the women showed their hair, that they will always be some sort of digital file somewhere in the IRGC, and it's only a matter of time till somebody comes and knocks on their door at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would rather die on the streets than not be able to sleep at night under a fear society, thinking that they were going to be dragged out to be tortured and killed. And especially when it comes to generational, they don't want to see that their children are also in that situation.
Right. And lastly, do you know, not do you know, but like our generation or my generation, we don't have the image of Iran other than this current regime. Do you think that if this regime was to fall over, how will that change or liberate their image? And how do you think this will be affecting the image of Iran that a lot of people right now have around the world?
That's the $1 million question, because we all see that, first of all, Iran is a very diverse region. It's a very diverse country. There's people from different ethnicities, different religions, different cultures, different values, all the way from those who support the Islamic regime to those who are looking to separate themselves from the state of Iran. So the day after, how Iran is going to be seen around the world is really depending on if those who can converge around the fall of the regime, if they could actually sit down and talk about the day after and come to some sort of peaceful transition in which all parties can maintain some sort of sovereignty within a state, I think that the future will be free. I'm not sure how exactly free. We are talking about the Middle East. We're not talking about the United States. There are cultural differences, but overall, it's a big question. I'm not willing to answer it because whatever I answer is going to be wrong. But I am speaking to a lot of people who are at the levels of power around Iran, and I'm pushing them as much as I can to end the conflict within the opposition, because there's significant conflict. And so it's up to the Iranian people how the world is going to see them by the way that they transition from this oppressive regime to whatever it is going to come forward. It's either going to be a free society or it's going to be what we see today in Syria, which Syria doesn't really exist as a single entity. It's broken up into different regions, controlled by different people. And so we might actually see that. I have no idea.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Gedalia Bublam for joining us as a Middle East Affairs analyst from Ellie. Thank you very much. Now we move to focus on to Europe. Danish Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen has confirmed that Denmark is engaged in an ongoing dialogue with NATO to significantly boost military activities and security in the Arctic. According to him, Denmark is moving forward with a more permanent and larger military presence in Greenland, which includes the participation of other NATO allies. This diplomatic push follows renewed pressure from the Trump administration, which has repeatedly called for the United States to take control of Greenland to counter Russian and Chinese influence. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Colin Chong-Yu-Keat. He's a Foreign Affairs and Security and Strategy Analyst, joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, for joining us once again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, as things evolve, or it's becoming worse or escalates towards U.S.'s attitude towards Greenland, what more can you tell us about this ongoing situation?
Well, we've seen how the intention by Denmark to have this ongoing dialogue with NATO is meant to to have this enhancement of credibility and leverage ahead of the meeting in the White House. And of course, also Denmark wants to signal to NATO that it is also a responsible partner, and of course also to show to give a message to Trump that he has this capacity, readiness, and intent to protect Greenland, and is coordinating with NATO to ensure that it happens. And of course also to NATO allies, Denmark is trying to be seen to step up as a reliable Arctic partner. And of course also this is all being part of the moves by Denmark to ensure that it has this legitimacy, it has this readiness and capacity to protect Greenland and to counter any Trump's move on Greenland, partly as a deterrence, partly as a reassurance to both NATO and to Trump. But of course, we have seen how this is all quite futile, in which by one way or the other, you have to confront the fact that Greenland's future security and safety will be in the hands of Washington. No European power, no NATO power is capable to protect Greenland from the forces of Russia and China. And of course, by saying Greenland, it means the security of the Arctic as a whole. So only Washington has the hard power capacity to not only protect Greenland, but of course also to bolster the defense of NATO, and to bolster the security of Europe and the Arctic, and to halt the presence, the incursions, and of course also the power presence of both Moscow and Beijing in this part of this critical geographical area that will have these profound implications on the future security of Europe and the US itself.
And how do you analyze, NATO? Is NATO currently capable, or Denmark on its own is capable, as NATO's Denmark's Danish defense minister has confirmed that Denmark is engaged in, ongoing dialogue with NATO. What is their capacity like? Of course, they're nowhere compared to US.
Well, before Trump came to the picture, we have seen how NATO is on the brink of collapse or irrelevance. And the defense spending by partners, by NATO members, have been in a sad state. And President Trump has ensured, has compelled, and has pressured the other NATO members to step up, and of course also to increase their own defense budget and defense commitment to NATO. And this is the single biggest factor as to how President Trump has revitalized NATO, and of course also in facing these renewed threats from Russia and from China, and of course also even with that enhancement of capacity, NATO is ill-equipped. In no ways that NATO has the capacity to confront the hard power threats posed by Moscow and Beijing, especially in the Arctic, and without the support of Washington. So this is the stark reality that NATO and Europe will have to confront. And the intent by President Trump to take over Greenland, to provide the security umbrella needed in the long-term projection is timely. It has been long overdue, and this wouldn't have happened in the administration of both Biden and Obama. And this is the right timing, the apt time for Washington to finally get in control of Greenland, and to ensure that there's no potential repercussions, or there's no potential backfiring measures from this move, knowing how Moscow and Beijing will react, and of course seeing how President Trump has acted in Venezuela and what he might be acting in Iran now. There's no way for Beijing or Moscow to retaliate as strong as they might have done so under the presidency of Biden or Obama. So this is a time frame that NATO and Europe should in fact welcome with support, instead of trying to consolidate, instead of trying to still have this kind of hostility and confrontation with the US. This is the right opening for Europe and NATO to defend themselves, not against the US, but against the real adversaries, that have been threatening the security of Europe and NATO, which are primarily Russia and China, for now and even for the next couple of years to come.
With that, I would like to thank Mr. Collins Chong-Yu-Keat for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout. Thank you. Now we move the focus on to Thailand. At least 22 people have been killed and 64 people injured after a construction crane collapsed onto a moving passenger train in northeastern Thailand. The crane derailed the train, crushing several carriages and setting one coach on fire. Nearly 200 passengers were on board when the accident occurred around 9 in the morning of local time. As the train was traveling from Bangkok to Ubon, Ratchathani province, rescue teams evacuated all passengers with dozens of injured taken to nearby hospitals. 8 remain in critical condition, including a 1-year-old child and an 85-year-old elderly passenger. The crane was part of a China-backed railway project linking Bangkok to Laos and onward to China. Thailand's Prime Minister has ordered a full investigation, calling for accountability and warning the disaster was likely caused by negligence and safety lapses, amid growing concerns over construction standards in the country. Let's hear what Thai authorities have shared.
จากรายงานสถานการณ์ล่าสุดเนี่ยก็เราพบว่ามีผู้บาดเจ็บนะครับและเสียชีวิตรวมกันทั้งหมด86รายครับโดยเสียชีวิต22รายครับมีการนำศพส่งโรงพยาบาล4แล้วก็มีผู้ที่ได้รับบาดเจ็บรวมทั้งหมด64รายอยู่ในกลุ่มอาการรุนแรงที่อยู่ในกลุ่มสีแดงเนี่ย8รายแล้วก็อยู่ในกลุ่มอาการปานกลางที่เรียกว่าสีเหลือง19รายแล้วก็อยู่ในกลุ่มอาการเล็กน้อยครับกลุ่มสีเขียวทั้งหมด37รายนะครับผู้ที่ได้รับบาดเจ็บรุนแรงเนี่ยนะครับมีตั้งแต่เด็กหญิงอายุ1ปีครับไปจนถึงผู้สูงอายุ85ปี
Now we move on to our next news. Farmers from the Coordination Rural Union are using their tractors to slow traffic at the entrance of Toulouse to Blagnac airports, staging a blockade to press their demands in France. Protesters say they feel sidelined compared with other farming unions and denounce what they describe as unequal treatment by the authorities. These actions in Toulouse coincide with farmers withdrawing from a 24-hour siege of the National Assembly in Paris, as farmers are protesting against cheap agriculture imports and demanding immediate government action on food security and financial aid. Let's listen into what one of the farmers has shared.
Rural du Gers, nous sommes venus défendre notre cause comme depuis plus de mois. Aujourd'hui, on défend toujours la même chose, que le gouvernement ne veut pas nous entendre, ne veut pas nous écouter, qu'il y a 2 poids et 2 mesures. Il y en a qui ont été à Paris, ils ont eu le tapis rouge. Nous, on arrive ici à l'aéroport de Toulouse, Blagnac, et on a un accueil de CRS, je pense qu'ils sont une centaine, pas loin, ou je sais pas, 80 pour vous voyez, 50 agriculteurs, parce que les autres, ils se sont fait bloquer dans Toulouse ailleurs, ils ont été dispersés. Voilà, et c'est que le problème de nourriture sera général, qu'on va être dépendant des autres pays, et le jour où les autres pays auront décidé de plus nous envoyer de nourriture, ben là, les Français vont crever de faim, et malheureusement, c'est dur à dire, mais un jour, la France aura des problèmes pour manger, on aura du mal à s'en sortir, et à manger à sa faim. Nous, dans les campagnes, on y arrivera, mais il y a des gens de la ville qui auront du mal à manger, et je pense qu'il faut prendre conscience et se mobiliser tous ensemble pour aujourd'hui défendre notre agriculture et défendre notre avenir.
That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous, and tonight Iran is burning. More than 648 people are dead and thousands are injured. Cities shaken by protests and a government that says this is not an uprising but a war. At the same time, the United States is issuing threats. President Donald Trump is talking about intervention, about force, about red lines. And Iran is responding with warnings of its very own. Europe is isolating Tehran, Israel is on alert, and the Middle East is on the edge. So, how did we get there? How close are we to a direct US-Iran clash? And why does history matter more than ever right now? Let's break it down. First, the scale of the crisis. Rights groups say more than 648 people have been killed since protests erupted across Iran. They began as economic demonstrations over inflation, job losses, and a collapsing currency. They quickly turned political. Chants against the clerical establishment echoed throughout the country. Calls for systemic change and direct challenges to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. The state response was brutal. Security forces deployed live ammunition, mass arrests, internet blackouts, and a sweeping crackdown that Tehran defends as national security. This is where the United States enters the picture. US President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff when doing business with the US, effective immediately. This comes as the US President Donald Trump has repeatedly warned that if Iran continues using force against protesters, Washington could intervene. His language has been deliberately ambiguous. Very strong options, all tools on the table. For Iran, this is not rhetoric. This is a threat backed by history. Tehran's response has been sharp. Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf warned that any US attack would be met with what he called an unforgettable lesson. Let's take a listen into it.
و متکبر آمریکا میگویم
که ما ملت ایران همان حرف حاج قاسم عزیزمان را به تو میزنیم. ای ترامپ قمارباز، ما حریف توییم، تو سرحسینیم، ما منتظریم، ما مرد میدان برای تو هستیم. بیا تا ببینی همه امکانات شما در منطقه نابود می شود. بیا تا ببینی چه بلایی بر سر پایگاه های آمریکایی و کشتی های آمریکایی و نیروهای آمریکایی در خواهد آمد. بیا. ترامپ متوهم، دروغ هایی که به تو میگویند باور نکن. به تو گفته بودند مشهد سقوط کرده، ولی مریدان امام رضا علیه السلام ایستادند تا پاسخ توهمات تو را بدهند.
And now even Europe is moving too. The European Parliament has taken one of its strongest steps yet. It has barred Iranian diplomats, officials and state representatives from entering its premises in Brussels, Strasbourg and Luxembourg. EU Parliament President Roberta Metsola said this goes beyond symbolism. Quote, "Those risking their lives on Iran's streets need more than words." This marks growing international isolation for Tehran. In retaliation, Iran's foreign ministry summoned the ambassadors of Britain, Germany, France and Italy. During the meeting, Iranian officials showed the envoys what they described as video evidence of violent acts by protesters, saying the actions went beyond peaceful demonstrations. But to understand why Iran reacts this way, you have to look back. US-Iran relations have been turbulent for decades. In 1953, the CIA backed a coup that ousted Iran's elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, after he nationalized Iran's oil. The US then supported the Shah's authoritarian rule for decades. And then, in 1979, the Islamic Revolution overthrew the Shah and turned Iran into an anti-American Islamic republic. The US Embassy hostage crisis sealed the break. The two countries have had no formal diplomatic relations since 1980. And this is critical. How many times has the US actually attacked Iran? In 1988, the US Navy shot down Iran air flight